Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
When we transform Nebraska corn into ethanol, it doesn't disappear from the food supply. It just takes a little detour. Ethanol is made from the starch. The rest of the corn becomes livestock feed to create meat and dairy products, corn oil, sweetener, and other food ingredients, and maybe a little carbon dioxide to make your soft drinks fizzy. Homegrown ethanol helps satisfy America's hunger for energy and the world's appetite for feed and food. Nebraska's family corn farmers, sustaining innovation.
Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Ron Plain analyzes the recent slide in hog prices. Brad Lubben explains farm program payments. Kevin Korus recaps disease problems in this year's corn and soybean crops. And Jay Parsons outlines the annual Forage Insurance Plan. University of Missouri Extension economist Ron Plain is our hog market analyst this week. U.S. pork farmers continue to churn out high amounts of meat. Production in September was record high for the month and up 9% from a year ago. But the USDA's cold storage report for that month showed an alarming statistic. Frozen pork supplies were up 19% from September 2014 and the highest September since data was first recorded in 1915. However, Thursday's export report for the month of September showed pork shipments 18% higher than September 2014. The most immediate concern, perhaps, is the huge slide in hog prices over the last few weeks. We started there when we talked with Ron Wednesday morning.
Jeff, it's been going the wrong way. We've seen a sharp drop in hog prices in the last 3 weeks, down $9, $10 per hundredweight. That's not really all that surprising. We normally trend lower this time of year. The odds-on favorite for the low for the year is sometime early to mid-December. So we're headed that direction. It's just kind of surprising how quickly they've fallen in the last 3 weeks. The
floor is a little ways away then.
Well, hopefully not too far away. We've got carcass prices around $57 and live weight basis at $47 at the plants, $40 at the terminal markets. We're probably going to take a bit more off of that, but I don't think we'll see near the decline going forward that we've had in the last 3 weeks.
Does this recent movement push us to losses per head?
Unfortunately, yes. Iowa State calculations said we made about $12 per hog during the month of September, probably 5 to 10 during October when the final numbers are in. But here in November, December, January, February, I'm expecting all 4 of those months to have red ink.
Next year, do you expect that to carry on further into the year?
Well, the pig report said that sow fairings this fall expect to be down 2.5%. This winter, down 0.7%. We're likely to get more pigs per litter. But all in all, hog slaughter next year pretty close to this year, and therefore prices in 2016 likely to average fairly close to what we had this year. Looks like this year on average is going to be slightly profitable, and right now I'd say the same thing for 2016.
It's kind of a broad question, but would you say that producers, because of 2 years ago, are situated well financially, or is it still a case-by-case basis?
In general, on average, I think the producers are in pretty good shape. As to farm, how much trouble one's had with PED and how many pigs you lost to that is a big factor. Other disease PRRS and stuff. There's always a lot of variation farm to farm. So in general, pretty good shape, but there's going to be some exceptions.
All right, you talked about farrowings and overall production. What does that mean for supply here as we go into 2016?
Well, pork production was up this year, 7–8% more pork produced than last year. We've got a lot of pork in cold storage, and so the supplies are plentiful and going to stay that way. We'll tighten it up next summer, but from the consumer standpoint, the kind of prices we've had in recent months will drop a bit in the winter. They always do, but all in all, not a whole lot different in 16 than what we've had this year, I don't think.
Yeah, that latest cold storage report was concerning, Ron. What's led to this much supply in freezers?
Yes, Jeff, a lot of red meat and a lot of chicken in cold storage. Several things. One, exports have been soft. The very strong U.S. dollar has hurt foreign demand for U.S. meats, and so a lot of it's piled up in cold storage. The fact that we've had increased hog slaughter and increased broiler production this year means the supplies are plentiful, and a lot of it is yet to be consumed.
What's your outlook on whether or not exports can pick up if the strength of the dollar moves at all?
The dollar's been strong. That's been one of the things, Jeff, that's really slowed U.S. exports and boosted imports of pork. If the dollar drops back in value, I'm optimistic that we can move more pork overseas. The world economy's not growing as fast as it was, but still growing, and foreign demand, I think could bounce back with a weaker dollar.
What about domestic demand, Ron? Paint that picture for me.
Well, it's slowly growing, Jeff. As a general rule of thumb, when the economy grows, meat demand grows. Consumers with money to spend like to buy meat. The growth hasn't been very robust in domestic economy, but enough to give us about a 2% higher domestic demand for pork this year than last year.
Do you think the World Health Organization's report on meat will significantly impact demand?
I'm not expecting it to, Jeff. If you pay close attention to the numbers, it was a very small factor, a negative factor for consuming processed meats. And, we've heard a lot of news over the years about what we eat. You've got to eat something, and I don't look for much of an impact at the consumer level.
Next week, North Dakota State Extension economist Frayne Olson will analyze the USDA's November crop report, and we'll look at cattle markets with Nebraska Extension livestock economist Kate Brooks. Drivers on Nebraska roads will soon have access to more biofuel blends. The Nebraska Energy Office says a nearly $2.9 million grant will help install 80 flex fuel pumps across the state, with a focus on higher population cities like Omaha, Lincoln, and Grand Island, and key Interstate 80 exchanges. The USDA had previously announced it would attempt to double the number of renewable fuel pumps in the U.S. by partnering with 21 states, including Nebraska. This state's public-private partnership is with the Nebraska Corn Board, the Nebraska Ethanol Board, and the Nebraska Department of Ag, with a portion of matching funds coming from the legislative bill the Nebraska unicameral passed last session. The country's eligible crop growers are receiving payments from Farm Bill enrollments of the 2014 crop. As we told you in August, those payouts could differ noticeably from county to county, and as we've also told you, those amounts could be less than expected due to budget sequestration. Earlier this week, we talked with Nebraska Extension Public Policy Specialist Brad Lubben to learn what producers might be able to expect.
FSA is sending payments out the door on the 2014 crop. The ARC program particularly paying very big this year. Those payments have been awaiting the end of the marketing year. That's complete. We have price data, we have yield data. FSA is calculating payments and sending them out to producers.
What do producers need to know about that amount they might see coming into their account?
Well, the ARC payment, of course, is based on this county level revenue result, or the individual farm level result if producers signed up for that version. At the county level, it's a function of this guarantee that is based on a 5-year Olympic average yield, 5-year Olympic average price. Then you take this year's, in this case 2014, actual yields and actual prices, calculate revenue against the guarantee. When there's a loss, there's an ARC payment. There's a cap on that payment to be no more than 10% of that benchmark. There is also a total reduction in payments of 6.8% because of sequestration. But all those factors plugged in, you can calculate a revenue payment per acre on a county by county basis, and producers are going to see large payments as a result.
I've seen a few articles online this week about producers being I don't know if it's concerned or just surprised that the payments differ
Right.
Perhaps greatly from county to county. How much might they differ in Nebraska?
Well, it's interesting. We're talking about a total of as much as $600 million in payments in Nebraska. Huge total pot here of dollars coming to Nebraska producers. But from county to county, crop to crop, practice to practice, you could see differences between nothing and as much as $100 per acre in a payment rate. That's a function of the average, the benchmark that came into that county for that crop. We could step back, we could think about old programs used to be tied to a national price and everybody got the same payment rate regardless of what they marketed, when they marketed. Then in 2008 we introduced the acre program. Here's a revenue safety net that makes more sort of relevant protection for producers, but it was tied to a state level result. The argument going into this farm bill was that the state level result isn't responsive enough, so producers argued for, groups argued for, and pushed for this county level number or even an individual number. The fact is a county level number is going to vary county to county because yield results are different county to county.
Can we look ahead to next year at all and
Right.
what it might mean for this current crop?
Well, as I stated, we could see ARC payments in Nebraska as much as $600 million for the 2014 crop that are paid now. Look ahead to the 15 crop numbers that will be paid in 16. We could see $500 million plus again. We deal with effectively the same price average going into the guarantee. Yield averages will vary again by county, and thus results will certainly vary again by county. But total numbers, we could see very substantial payments again in 2016.
How do you expect these payments will affect overall farm incomes?
Right. Well, if you take ARC payments that are very big, compare them to direct payments that producers have given up. That was $300 million plus a year. On average, we don't expect ARC payments to exceed what we spent on direct payments, but the first couple years here are looking to be very big. 600 million or so of ARC payments this year could translate into about 800 million of total farm program payments, including conservation and other programs. That's a substantial part of this year's bottom line for producers. Projections for the 2015 farm income number might be somewhere between $3.5 and $4 billion. 800 million is a huge chunk of that this year.
You're having a series of meetings coming up across the state. Outline for me what those are and
Right.
what you'll talk about.
Well, looking at these farm program payments and looking at crop and livestock outlook and the financial management challenges in this sort of shrinking farm income projection, it's time for a good Ag Outlook series, and our annual Cornhusker Economics Outlook series rolls out across the state again on November 17 to 24th.
You can find more information about the Cornhusker Economics Outlook meetings online at agecon.unl.edu/CEO. The sessions are free to attend, but pre-registration is encouraged to the host Nebraska Extension office. Only a month ago, TransCanada applied for a permit from the Nebraska Public Service Commission to use eminent domain to get the Keystone XL pipeline built. Because of that, the company said this week it asked the U.S. State Department to delay its review of the $8 billion project. The State Department, however, denied that request and says it'll continue its review, but offered no timeline for its decision. TransCanada first announced the Keystone XL pipeline project in 2008. Nebraska's farmers are likely wrapping up the fall harvest. The latest USDA state reports show growers were 75% finished in corn and 97% complete in soybeans. Nebraska Extension weed management specialist Amit Jhala says producers can now decide whether or not to make a herbicide application. Amit says while fall applications aren't necessarily needed for all weeds, mare's tail may require it. He says the weed is resistant to glyphosate and the ALS group of herbicides and present on more than 2 million acres of Nebraska cropland.
Marestail is more difficult to control, and the reason is Marestail can emerge in the fall as well as in the early spring. And some research conducted at UNL reported that majority of Marestail in Nebraska is emerging in the fall. And so it will be the best time to control Marestail is starting from the fall, so you can get effective control by herbicide applications when Marestail is just growing and they are young and they are not too tall. So fall application is more critical if Marestail is the primary weed in your fields.
Amit says growers can wait to control Marestail until spring, but unfavorable weather then might prevent farmers from applying before planting. If that happens, Marestail may grow too tall and post-emergence herbicides could become less effective. On the Market Journal website, you can find Amit's recent article on controlling winter weeds. It includes more information on certain weeds and control options. In its October crop report, the USDA projected Nebraska's average corn yield would be 184 bushels per acre, and its average soybean yield would be 56 bushels per acre. As the 2015 growing season wraps up, we thought it'd be a good time to look back on disease issues in this year's corn and soybean crops. Kevin Korus is a coordinator with UNL's Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic on East Campus. He joined us Thursday to look at problems farmers experienced, starting with early season challenges in farms across the state.
So early on, because of the cool, wet conditions, we did have a lot of Pythium issues, so we had a lot of replanting going on with our corn. We also had some Fusarium in our dryland corners, causing root rot issues early on in corn as well. Early on in soybeans, similar issues with Pythium, and then Phytophthora again, so causing some of our growers to have to go out there and replant because of standability issues. In both cases, those early season diseases can show their heads, they can rear their ugly heads a little bit later on in the season, and they did that in corn. We had some Pythium and Fusarium stalk rot occur later on in the season, and those infections occurred as seedlings, and that fungus just kind of hung out until later on in the season. So we did have some standability issues, a lot of harvesters having to go in there and pick up corn off the ground. And same with soybeans, we had some Phytophthora that hung out in the plant and then later on exposed itself as a Phytophthora crown and stem rot.
What other disease problems did you see mid-season maybe in corn?
So mid-season with corn, we had in some areas of the state, northern corn leaf blight and then gray leaf spot rear their ugly heads as well. Those incidents were mainly confined to the south, central, southeastern part of the state, but they did get to levels that were concernable and they warranted fungicide treatment in some cases. We also had southern rust come in early in the season, so we got very concerned about its presence, and it was in a very large area of the state. But we had our weather conditions help us for once this year, and it remained relatively cool, moderate temperatures, and that actually arrested the development of southern rust. So although it came in early, it didn't blow up to the levels we feared it might, which is good. So not a lot of yield reduction there. In some cases, some people did apply a fungicide, but
some of those problems, they could overwinter and be problems again later.
This is true, yeah. So for the northern corn leaf blight and gray leaf spot diseases, they are residue borne, so they are favored by no-till, continuous corn. If you do have issues this year, you want to think about maybe planting soybeans in a field that had corn in it with gray leaf spot next year, or just going away from corn for a couple years, or doing some tillage. Southern rust, on the other hand, blows up every year, so you can't, those practices don't quite work for managing southern rust.
How prevalent was white mold in soybeans this year?
So we actually had really conducive temperatures around flowering in that northeastern part of the state that led to some severe infection. So we did get white mold. I wouldn't quite call it an epidemic, but we did see it in relatively high amounts compared to normal, just because we had really cool, wet conditions around flowering.
How are the quality of samples this year?
So really good, actually. Our clients are really learning how to keep samples fresh mid-season when things are out there and they're scouting, getting them to me really well there. The thing that's concerning sometimes is, a lot of growers will go through their field when they're harvesting, and now with our really accurate data, we can pinpoint areas of the field where we have yield dips, and so they'll go in there after they harvest and take dead plant material and want a pathogen diagnosis or disease diagnosis on that material, and it's very difficult to actually find evidence of plant pathogens once that plant has died. There's other things that come in and basically deteriorate those microorganisms, and they become difficult to find. So there are some pathogens that we can say, for instance, the dead soybean plant, if it had charcoal rot, you could still see that after it was dead, but most of the other diseases become very difficult to distinguish and identify. So just have that as a caveat. When submitting samples that are dead, there's only so much I can say.
The Market Journal website has videos with information on specific corn diseases in Nebraska. You can find that under the MJ Extras tab towards the top of our homepage. The November Nebraska Farmer says data management can be difficult to grasp, but it holds potential for improving efficiency and net returns on a farming operation. Fifth-generation farmer Zach Honeycutt of Giltner says growers are just scraping the surface on data management. This month's issue says getting a handle on data management starts with collecting good, accurate information, including at the aggregate level. With proper data management, there is then the opportunity to fine-tune management zones and hopefully realize a return on investment by doing so. For more information on how Honeycutt manages big data, you can check out the November Nebraska Farmer. A new insurance program could offer assistance to crop or livestock producers in certain states, including Nebraska. The Rainfall Index Annual Forage Insurance Plan could help producers planting annual forage crops. We recently talked with Jay Parsons, a Nebraska Extension farm and ranch management specialist, to learn more about the coverage.
It's a new insurance product from RMA, and it's being piloted in Nebraska and a number of other states through the middle of the country. And it's really only its second year of use, so a lot of people don't know about it. But it's basically for annually planted crops that are used for feed or fodder, so livestock use. And they have it set up to where they have a fall growing season and a spring growing season. The producer picks which one matches, and then they can sign up for it. And it's triggered off of the Rainfall Index that is published by NOAA, and you decide where you want to put the coverage and so on.
How would it compare to that old Rainfall Index, or that Rainfall Index that producers could use?
The Rainfall Index has been used for the pasture, rangeland, and forage product, which has been around for a number of years for producers. That product is for perennial grasses, and you insure basically 2-month intervals anytime during the entire calendar year. Because it's perennial pasture type of grasses, it's much lower coverage dollar value that you can put on, and it's spread out throughout the year. This one is triggered by those same indexes, but it's you can basically put it on fall planted forage, so a second crop following soybeans or wheat or maybe corn harvested for silage or something like that, or spring planted forage that you're trying to get some growth out of and some feed out of in the spring season. So it's quite a bit different. It's annually planted crops versus perennial. Higher dollar value you can put on it because it can be put in irrigated cropland and so on.
What dates do you need to know for this one?
Well, the fall planted dates have already passed. So the fall growing season, fall planted growing season is September 1 to the end of March, and you have to sign up for that by July 1, and it's for anything planted in that period from July 1 to November 15th. You sign up for it, and then you report your acreage later on after you figure out what you've actually planted. The spring one is coming up. December 15th is a sign up for that, and it's for things planted from December 15th into July. So you got March 1 through the end of September is that growing season, so it's more of a spring, summer growing season on that one.
And there's a catastrophic element of this one as well?
Yes, there is, and that's a difference between it and the old, or the PRF from the pasture, rangeland, and forage. And that is that you can, producers, if you're not using it strictly for grazing, so you're planning on harvesting some hay off of it, or maybe grain off of it or something, and then grazing, or maybe not grazing at all because you're harvesting it entirely for feed, you can get catastrophic coverage on it. And catastrophic coverage is a flat $300 fee for all the acres in the county, so it's very inexpensive. It's not figured on 2-month intervals, but it's the entire 7-month growing season, and it's 65% of rainfall is the trigger point on that, and it's 45% of the productive value. So those two numbers are locked in, those percentages, but it's very inexpensive for producers to get that coverage.
PRF, meanwhile, that deadline's coming up?
The PRF deadline for the 2016 calendar year, that deadline's coming up on November 15th. So by then, if producers are interested in that, they need to have signed up for it and selected the months they want covered for 2016.
The Risk Management Agency has more information available online about the annual Forage Insurance Plan. You can find that through a link on the Market Journal homepage. Now, with this week's weather forecast, here's Nebraska Extension State Climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here we again for the weekly forecast. During this last week, the big system that moved through the middle of the week did drop some welcome precipitation across the Panhandle, portions of southwest and the west central portions of Nebraska, and also including the northwestern Sandhills region. We had precipitation totals ranging anywhere from about 1/4 of an inch to up around 3/4 of an inch. The heaviest totals reported so far come out of the southwestern Panhandle, and we did see that mix of rain and snow develop across a sizable portion of the Panhandle before the system moved toward the east. In eastern Nebraska, we really missed out on much of the precipitations we got into the drier region of the storm system. So just a few sprinkles were reported before that system re-energized that passed to the east of us and dropped some fairly significant moisture across portions of eastern Kansas and Missouri and Arkansas. Now, as we go through this next week, we are looking for another system to come through as we go into the middle of next week. But otherwise, this weekend looks to be cool with a gradual warming trend as we go into the early part of next week. So let's take a look at the upper air models. What we will see is that system that did bring the precipitation to western Nebraska now sits over the Great Lakes. It is extending a piece of energy toward the south, and we are expecting to see some type of low pressure system develop on this extended pieces of the frontal boundary, and as it moves toward the north and east, it will strengthen. So as we go into tomorrow, what we are going to see is here's that little piece of energy starting to generate itself. May actually induce some clouds in southeast Nebraska and a little bit cooler temperatures in the remainder of the state. But if this is being overplayed by the model, we would expect to see a fairly nice day statewide on Sunday. Temperatures primarily into the 60s with maybe the outside chance for 70s across the southwestern part of the state. Now as we get into Monday, we start to see the system approaching the western United States. That brings us in a southwest flow, so all of us should see a nice day, a little bit windy here across the state, but we will see warm temperatures primarily in the 60s with an isolated 70s, not out of the question over portions of south central Nebraska. As we get into Tuesday, the system starts to eject out. Right now it's bringing the heaviest precipitation across the western half of the state with the ability, as it passes through, getting on the backside, possibly generating once again a mixture of rain and snow across the panhandle and portions of the western sandhills. Further east, where we were probably going to not see much precipitation until we get the overnight hours, and that will clear through the state during the early morning hours of Wednesday, bringing in a northwest flow and much cooler air into our region. Right now the models are indicating the potential for mid to upper 30s across north central northwest Nebraska in the wake of this system before we start to see very cool conditions push toward the east and a brief warm up on Thursday with temperatures rising about 5 to 10 degrees before another frontal boundary starts to push through Thursday night into Friday, bringing once again a shot of cool air into the state and a gradual northwest flow. So temperatures look to be on the cool side as we end the next week. So if we look at the 8 to 14 day forecast, we are looking for a very nice weekend, except for a little bit on the cool side, before we see that system move through on Tuesday with the best chance of precipitation across western Nebraska. And as we go later into the week, we see a reinforcing shot of cool air on Thursday before we start to see a gradual warm up on Friday. So we look at the 8 to 14 day forecast, looking like above normal temperatures to the east, and in terms of precipitation, keeps most of precipitation well off to our east. The new 30-day forecast for November indicates the warm temperatures to the east and an increase in precipitation much farther to the north than it was in the middle of October.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews can be found individually on the Market Journal website and through the Market Journal mobile app. They include information on hog markets, farm program payments, 2015 crop diseases, and the annual Forage Insurance Plan. As always, you can keep up with Market Journal during the week by following us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Next week, Frayne Olson will be our grain market analyst, and Kate Brooks will look at cattle markets. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.